A Child Substance Abuse Guide. Chapter 1. Child Substance Abuse Information. Children and Drugs. Most of the following notes come from the free government publications you can get at ed.gov/offices/osdfs/parents_guide, Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools. health.org/govpubs. health.org/pubs. health.org/pubs/par guide, Parents Guide. Young people use drugs for many reasons that have to do with how they feel about themselves, how they get along with others, and how they live. No one factor determines who will use drugs and who will not, but here are some predictors. Low grades or poor school performance. Aggressive, rebellious behavior. Excessive influence by peers. Lack of parental support and guidance. Behavior problems at an early age. Being alert to the signs of alcohol and other drug use requires a keen eye. It is sometimes hard to know the difference between normal teenage behavior and behavior caused by drugs. Changes that are extreme or that last for more than a few days may signal drug use. Consider the following questions. Does your child seem withdrawn, depressed, tired and careless about personal grooming? Has your child become hostile and uncooperative? Have your child's relationships with other family members deteriorated? Has your child dropped his old friends in favor of new punky-looking, hard rock, wannabe cool badass types? Is your child no longer doing well in school, grades slipping, attendance irregular? Has your child lost interest in hobbies, sports, and other favorite activities? Have your child's eating or sleeping patterns changed? Positive answers to any of these questions can indicate alcohol or other drug use. However, these signs may also apply to a child who is not using drugs but who may be having other problems at school or in the family. If you are in doubt, get help. Have your family doctor or local clinic examine your child to rule out illness or other physical problems. Watch for physical signs of drugs and drug paraphernalia as well. Possession of common items such as pipes, rolling papers, small medicine bottles, eye drops or butane lighters may signal that your child is using drugs. Even when the signs are clear, usually after the child has been using drugs for a time, parents sometimes do not want to admit that their child could have a problem. Anger, resentment, guilt, and a sense of failure as parents are common reactions. If your child is using drugs, it is important to avoid blaming yourself for the problem and to get whatever help is needed to stop it. The earlier a drug problem is detected and faced, the more likely it is that your child can be helped. First, do not confront a child who is under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, but wait until the child is sober, then discuss your suspicions with your child calmly and objectively. Bring in other members of the family to help, if necessary. Second, impose whatever discipline your family has decided on for violating the rules and stick to it. Don't relent because the youngster promises never to do it again. Many young people lie about their alcohol and drug use. If you think your child is not being truthful and the evidence is pretty strong, you may wish to have your child evaluated by a health professional experienced in diagnosing adolescents with alcohol and drug-related problems. If your child has developed a pattern of drug use or has engaged in heavy use, you will probably need help to intervene. If you do not know about drug treatment programs in your area, call your doctor, local hospital, or county mental health society for a referral. Your school district should have a substance abuse coordinator or a counselor who can refer you to treatment programs. 2. Parents whose children have been through treatment programs can also provide information. The most promising drug prevention programs are those in which parents, students, schools, and communities join together to send a firm, clear message that the use of alcohol and other drugs will not be tolerated. During the early teens, fitting in with friends is a controlling influence. In some ways, the onset of puberty is like a rebirth. Children want and need to let go of the past and to find their own unique identity. This often means letting go of old friendships and ties with teachers and other adults, as well as old ways of doing things. The decision-making and problem-solving methods that they learned as young children are still helpful, but young teens will be making new decisions based on new information and new goals. Young people this age can begin to deal with abstractions and the future. They understand that their actions have consequences and they know how their behavior affects others. They sometimes have a shaky self-image, they are not sure whether they are growing and changing adequately, they are often in conflict with adults, they are not sure where they are headed and they tend to see themselves as not okay. Strong emotional support and a good model of adult behavior are particularly important now. Young people who use alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs typically begin before leaving the 9th grade. Be sure that family discussions about drugs emphasize the immediate, unpleasant effects of alcohol and other drug use. Telling junior high school students who are smoking that they will get lung cancer or heart disease in several decades is less likely to make an impression than talking about bad breath, stained teeth, and fingers and burned clothing. Many young people use drugs because their friends use drugs. A large portion of your prevention efforts during these years should be spent reinforcing your child's motivation to avoid alcohol and other drugs. Here are some important steps. Counteract peer influence with parent influence. Reinforce your no alcohol/no drug use rules and expectations so that your child clearly understands that drinking and using drugs are unacceptable and illegal. Children may argue that everyone is doing it and not experiencing any harmful effects. Inform your child that alcohol and other drug use is illegal for children and that everyone is not doing it. Emphasize how unpredictable the effects of alcohol and other drugs can be, so that although many drug users may appear to function properly, drug use is extremely risky and all it takes is one bad experience to change a life. Get to know your child's friends and their parents. Meet your child's friends. Invite them to your home frequently. Share your expectations about behavior with other parents. Work together to develop a set of rules about curfews, unchaperoned parties, and other social activities. Monitor your child's whereabouts. If your child is at a friend's house, be sure that you know the friend and the parents. If your child is at the movies, be sure you know what film is playing and at which theater. Last-minute changes in plans, such as visiting a different friend or going to a different movie, should not be permitted unless the child checks with mom, dad, or another designated adult. Research shows that drug use among children is 10 times more prevalent than parents suspect. In addition, many students know that their parents do not recognize the extent of drug use. As a result, some young people believe that they can use drugs with impunity. Drug use affects young people of all ages throughout the nation. Heavy drinking, defined as 5 or more drinks on one occasion, is reported by 40% of high school seniors and more than one-half are occasional users of alcohol. Initial use of alcohol and other drugs occurs at an increasingly early age. 19% of seniors report they had initiated cigarette use by 6th grade and 11% had used alcohol. 44% of 8th graders have tried cigarettes and 70% have at least tried alcohol. 27% of 8th graders have gotten drunk at least once and 13% report they have consumed 5 or more drinks in a row. Of the illicit drugs, marijuana and inhalants show the earliest pattern of initiation. About 2.8% of seniors had begun using both of these substances by the 6th grade. The peak initiation rate is reached by 9th grade. Peak initiation rates for cocaine and hallucinogens are reached in 10th and 11th grade, with the initiation rate for nearly all drugs falling off by 12th grade. Drugs cause physical and emotional dependence. Users may develop a craving for specific drugs and their bodies may respond to the presence of drugs in ways that lead to increased drug use. Regular users of drugs develop tolerance, a need to take larger doses to get the same initial effect. They may respond by combining drugs, frequently with devastating results. Many teenage drug users calling a national cocaine hotline report that they take other drugs just to counteract the unpleasant effects of cocaine. Certain drugs, such as opiates, barbiturates, alcohol, and nicotine, create physical dependence. With prolonged use, these drugs become part of the body chemistry. When a regular user stops taking the drug, the body experiences the physiological trauma known as withdrawal. Psychological dependence occurs when taking drugs becomes the center of the user's life. Among children, psychological dependence erodes school performance and can destroy ties to family and friends, as well as cause the child to abandon outside interests, values, and goals. The child goes from taking drugs to feel good, to taking them to keep from feeling bad. Over time, drug use itself heightens the bad feelings and can leave the user suicidal. More than half of all adolescent suicides are drug-related. Drugs can remain in the body long after use has stopped. The extent to which a drug is retained in the body depends on the drug's chemical composition, that is, whether it is fat-soluble. Fat-soluble drugs such as marijuana and phencyclidine, PCP, seek out and settle in the fatty tissues. As a result, they build up in the fatty parts of the body such as the brain. Such accumulations of drugs and their slow release over time may have effects on the mind and body weeks or even months after drug use has stopped. Social influences play a key role in making drug use attractive to children. The first temptations to use drugs may come in social situations in the form of pressures to act grown up by smoking cigarettes or using alcohol or marijuana. Television and movies have the greatest influence on 4th through 6th graders in making drugs and alcohol seem attractive. The second greatest influence is other children. Drug use frequently progresses in stages, from occasional use to regular use, to multiple drug use and ultimately to total dependency. With each successive stage, drug use intensifies, becomes more varied and results in increasingly debilitating effects. But this progression is not inevitable. Drug use can be stopped at any stage, however, the more deeply involved children are with drugs, the more difficult it is for them to stop. The best way to fight drug use is to begin prevention efforts before children start using drugs. Prevention efforts that focus on young children are the most effective means to fight drug use. Drugs can interfere with memory, sensation, and perception. They distort experiences and cause a loss of self-control that can lead users to harm themselves and others. Drugs interfere with the brain's ability to take in, sort and synthesize information. As a result, sensory information runs together, providing new sensations while blocking normal ability to understand the information received. Drugs erode the self-discipline and motivation necessary for learning. Pervasive drug use among students creates a climate in the schools that is destructive to learning. Research shows that drug use can cause a decline in academic performance. This has been found to be true for students who excelled in school prior to drug use as well as for those with academic or behavioral problems prior to use. According to one study, students using marijuana were twice as likely to average DS and FS as other students. The decline in grades often reverses when drug use is stopped. Drug use is closely tied to being truant and dropping out of school. High school seniors who are heavy drug users are more than 3 times as likely to skip school as non-users. About 1/5 of heavy users skipped 3 or more school days a month, more than 6 times the truancy rate of non-users. In a Philadelphia study, dropouts were almost twice as likely to be frequent drug users as were high school graduates. 4 in 5 dropouts used drugs regularly. Drug use is associated with crime and misconduct that disrupt the maintenance of an orderly and safe school atmosphere conducive to learning. Drugs not only transform schools into marketplaces for dope deals, they also lead to the destruction of property and to classroom disorder. Among high school seniors, heavy drug users were more than 3 times as likely to vandalize school property and twice as likely to have been involved in a fight at school or at work as non-users. Students on drugs create a climate of apathy, disruption, and disrespect for others. For example, among teenage callers to a national cocaine hotline, 32% reported that they sold drugs and 64% said that they stole from family, friends, or employers to buy drugs. A drug-ridden environment is a strong deterrent to learning not only for drug users but for other students as well. Books about children and drug use are at number 649.4 or HV5824 at the library. Signs of drug use. Most of the following notes come from the free government publications you can get at health.org/govpubs. Health.org, 800-662-4357. Health.org/pubs, 800-729-4357. 6686. health.org/pub/PAR Guide, Parents Guide. Changing patterns of performance, appearance, and behavior may signal use of drugs. The items in the first category listed below provide direct evidence of drug use. The items in the other categories offer signs that may indicate drug use. Adults should watch for extreme changes in children's behavior, changes that together form a pattern associated with drug use. In any case, the two biggest signs of possible drug use are withdrawal and antisocial behavior. Possession of drug-related paraphernalia such as pipes, rolling papers, small decongestant bottles, eye drops or small butane torches. Possession of drugs or evidence of drugs, such as pills, white powder, small glass vials or hypodermic needles, peculiar plants or butts, seeds or leaves in ashtrays or in clothing pockets. Odor of drugs, smell of incense or other cover-up scents. Drug-related magazines, slogans on clothing. Conversation and jokes that are preoccupied with drugs. Hostility in discussing drugs. Collection of beer cans. Memory lapses, short attention span, difficulty in concentration. Poor physical coordination, slurred or incoherent speech. Unhealthy appearance, indifference to hygiene and grooming. Bloodshot eyes, dilated pupils. Dramatic changes in school performance. Marked downturn in students' grades not just from CS to FS but from S to BS and CS, assignments not completed. Increased absenteeism or tardiness. Changes in behavior. Chronic dishonesty, lying, stealing, cheating, trouble with the police. Changes in friends, evasiveness in talking about new ones. Possession of large amounts of money. Increasing and inappropriate anger, hostility, irritability, secretiveness. Reduced motivation, energy, self-discipline, self-esteem. Diminished interest in extracurricular activities and hobbies. What a parent can do. Most of the following notes come from the free government publications you can get at health.org/govpubs. Health.org, 800-662-4357. Health.org/pubs, 800-729-6686. Health.org/pubs/PAR Guide, Parents Guide. The most basic thing to do in a nutshell is to raise your children well with moral values and self-respect. Communicate values openly. Talk about why values such as honesty, self-reliance, and responsibility are important and how values help children make good decisions. Recognize how your actions affect the development of your child's values. Look for conflicts between your words and your actions. Remember that children are quick to sense when parents send signals by their actions that it's all right to duck unpleasant duties or to be dishonest. Telling your child to say that you are not at home because a phone call comes at an inconvenient time is, in effect, teaching your child that it is all right to be dishonest. Make sure that your child understands your family values. Parents assume, sometimes mistakenly, that children have absorbed values even though they may be rarely or never discussed. Many parents hesitate to discuss alcohol and other drug use with their child. Some of us believe that our children couldn't become involved with illegal substances. Others delay because we don't know what to say or how to say it, or we are afraid of putting ideas into our children's heads. Don't wait until you think your child has a problem. Many young people in treatment programs say that they had used alcohol and other drugs for at least 2 years before their parents knew about it. Begin early to talk about alcohol and other drugs and keep the lines of communication open. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't have all the answers. Let your child know that you are concerned and that you can work together to find answers. Here are some basic hints for improving your ability to talk with your child about alcohol and other drugs. Be a good listener. Be available to discuss even sensitive subjects. Give clear messages. Give lots of praise. Model good behavior. Effective communication between parents and children is not always easy to achieve. Children and adults have different communication styles and different ways of responding in a conversation. In addition, timing and atmosphere may determine how successful communication will be. Parents should make time to talk with their children in a quiet, unhurried manner. The following tips are designed to make communication more successful. Listening. Pay attention. Don't interrupt. Don't prepare what you will say while your child is speaking. Reserve judgment until your child has finished and has asked you for a response. Looking. Be aware of your child's facial expression and body language. Is your child nervous or uncomfortable, frowning, drumming fingers, tapping a foot, looking at the clock? Or does your child seem relaxed, smiling, looking you in the eyes? Reading these signs will help parents know how the child is feeling. During the conversation, acknowledge what your child is saying. Move your body forward if you are sitting, touch a shoulder if you are walking, or nod your head and make eye contact. Responding. I am very concerned about. Or I understand that it is sometimes difficult. Are better ways to respond to your child than beginning sentences with you should, or if I were you, or when I was your age we didn't. Speaking for oneself sounds thoughtful and is less likely to be considered a lecture or an automatic response. If your child tells you something you don't want to hear, don't ignore the statement. Don't offer advice in response to every statement your child makes. It is better to listen carefully to what is being said and try to understand the real feelings behind the words. Make sure you understand what your child means. Repeat things to your child for confirmation. As parents, we are responsible for setting rules for our children to follow. When it comes to alcohol and other drug use, strong rules need to be established to protect the well-being of a child. Setting rules is only half the job, however, we must be prepared to enforce the penalties when the rules are broken. Be specific. Explain the reasons for the rules. Tell your child what the rules are and what behavior is expected. Discuss the consequences of breaking the rules, what the punishment will be, how it will be carried out, how much time will be involved, and what the punishment is supposed to achieve. Be consistent. Make it clear to your child that a no alcohol/no drug use rule remains the same at all times in your home, in a friend's home, anywhere the child is. Be reasonable. Don't add new consequences that have not been discussed before the rule was broken. Avoid unrealistic threats such as, "Your father will kill you when he gets home." Instead, react calmly and carry out the punishment that the child expects to receive for breaking the rule. As parents, we need to know about alcohol and other drugs so that we can provide our children with current and correct information. If we have a working knowledge of common drugs, know their effects on the mind and body and the symptoms of their use, we can discuss these subjects intelligently with our children. In addition, well-informed parents are better able to recognize if a child has symptoms of alcohol or drug-related problems. At a minimum, you should know the different types of drugs and alcohol most commonly used and the dangers associated with each. Be able to identify paraphernalia associated with each drug, be familiar with the street names of drugs, know what drugs look like. Know the signs of alcohol and other drug use and be alert for changes in your child's behavior or appearance. Know how to get help promptly if you suspect your child may be using alcohol and other drugs. Parents who are clear about not wanting their children to use illicit drugs may find it harder to be tough about alcohol. After all, alcohol is legal for adults. Many parents drink, and alcohol is a part of some religious observances. As a result, we may view alcohol as a less dangerous substance than other drugs. The facts say otherwise. 6 million teenagers have a drinking problem. 4% of high school seniors drink alcohol every day. Alcohol-related accidents are the leading cause of death among young people 15 to 24 years of age. About half of all youthful deaths in drowning, fires, suicide and homicides are alcohol-related. Young people who use alcohol at an early age are more likely to use alcohol heavily and to have alcohol-related problems. They are also more likely to abuse other drugs and to get into trouble with the law. Young people whose body weight is lower than adults reach a higher blood alcohol concentration level than adults and show greater effects for longer periods of time. Children are naturally curious and many will experiment, but for most, it will be just a regular part of growing up and it won't dominate their lives. If your kid comes home drunk or high a few times, you must be realistic, it really ain't that big a deal. He's just exploring life. I'd be more worried about the kid who abstained totally. I did it when I was a kid, and come to think of it, most of the people I knew back then did too, and we were athletes and scholars. Be wary of the child who really likes to get high every day or finds a sense of friendship in his druggy friends. When parents take an active interest in their children's behavior, they provide the guidance and support children need to resist drugs. Parents can do this by knowing their children's whereabouts, activities, and friends. Working to maintain and improve family communications and listening to their children. Being able to discuss drugs knowledgeably. It is far better for children to obtain their information from their parents than from their peers or on the street. Teach standards of right and wrong and demonstrate these standards through personal example. Help children to resist peer pressure to use alcohol and other drugs by supervising their activities, knowing who their friends are and talking with them about their interests and problems. Learn about the effects of alcohol and other drug use, the reasons why drugs are harmful and ways to resist pressures to try drugs. Use an understanding of the danger posed by alcohol and other drugs to help other students avoid them. Encourage other students to resist drugs, persuade those using drugs to seek help and report those selling drugs to parents and the school principal. Be knowledgeable about drugs and signs of drug use. When symptoms are observed, respond promptly. Communicating regularly with the parents of their children's friends and sharing their knowledge about drugs with other parents. Being selective about their children's viewing of television and movies that portray drug use as glamorous or exciting. Parents are in the best position to recognize early signs of drug use in their children. To inform and involve themselves, parents should take the following steps. Learn about the extent of the drug problem in their community and in their children's schools. Learn how to recognize signs of drug use. Meet with parents of their children's friends or classmates about the drug problem at their school. Establish a means of sharing information to determine which children are using drugs and who is supplying them. Parents who suspect their children are using drugs often must deal with their own emotions of anger, resentment, and guilt. Frequently they deny the evidence and postpone confronting their children. Yet, the earlier a drug problem is detected and faced, the less difficult it is to overcome. If parents suspect that their children are using drugs, they should take the following steps. Devise a plan of action. Consult with school officials and other parents. Discuss their suspicions with their children in a calm, objective manner. Do not confront a child while he or she is under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. Impose disciplinary measures that help remove the child from those circumstances where drug use might occur. Seek advice and assistance from drug treatment professionals and from a parent group. Much of the literature about drugs and alcohol is contradictory, written and put out by people and interests who are either secretly pro-recreational drugs or have some interest in the sales of pharmaceutical drugs and alcohol. Read any literature before you give it to your child. The drug problem is extensive within society, hence the school system, local police, and community groups are involved. Many communities are trying to put it all together with school-parent cooperation, parent community activities, and parent support groups. If you feel very strongly about it, reach out to them for information and to get involved. Project DARE, Drug Abuse Resistance Education, uses uniformed law enforcement officers in classrooms as regular instructors. DARE officers use a drug curriculum that teaches students resistance to peer pressure to use drugs, self-management skills, and alternatives to drug use. Contact your local police department to get free information and even get a police officer to come and talk to a group of kids about drugs. Involve local law enforcement agencies in all aspects of drug prevention, assessment, enforcement, and education. Personally, I got drunk for the first time when I was 13 years old. I used alcohol and drugs on a recreational, casual basis all through my youth and on into early adulthood. At about the age of 25, I stopped doing it all for a while and now I'm back to being a casual user. I was a teacher at a college for a few years and saw many students that busted loose and went off the deep end because they were away from home for the first time. I say be honest with your kids. Tell them if they're gonna do it, don't do something they can't handle. If they get into any kind of trouble like get super stoned and can't handle it, tell them to call you so that you can help them. I can't be a hypocrite and preach total abstinence when I'm curious by nature and did it when I was younger. I had sense though. I never went too far with it. There's a fine line there. You have to have a good relationship with your kids to know where it is. Don't tolerate slouchiness in your kids. That means they're doing something to better themselves all the time automatically. I know it's tough for some parents whose kids are taking the loser way out. If they are, try the tough love approach with them, tell them to go to hell until and unless they smarten up. The best antidote is to get your kids involved with hobbies and passions that they really love and supersede any desire for drugs. To me, marijuana is the most overrated drug out there. After the first few times, I could never get anything out of it anymore. I think a lot of drug thing is just rebellion and feeling cool that they belong to this so-called demonized subculture. Tell your kids about moderation, overdosing, to use their better judgment and don't drive when they drink. My theory is that most people that experiment with drugs eventually get it out of their systems and that's it. They see it for themselves and they have no need to touch the stuff again. All the same, many kids don't have good judgment, so you have to watch them to see that they don't go overboard. Consumer Information Center. Pueblo, Colorado 81009. 888-8 Pueblo. Publications.usa.gov. Fee booklet, Growing Up Drug Free, A Parent's Guide to Prevention.